Welcome to the Global Good Podcast, where each week we'll travel around the globe meeting the most incredible people doing the work that's truly making the world a better place. From the peaks of the Himalayas to leagues under the sea, join us as we embark on adventure for good. Hello! This week, before we get started, we have a few announcements. First, go check out our social media. You can find us on Twitter at Global Good Pod and Instagram at The Global Good Podcast. Second, go visit our website for all the resources you need to take action and support the people and organizations we've met so far on our journey at theglobalgoodpodcast.com. Last request, please subscribe, rate, and review. Every click or comment of support moves us up the list so others can find us. All right, everyone, enjoy the show. In recent days, Afghanistan has been in the news worldwide as reports about withdrawal of American and NATO troops from the country have garnered a wide range of responses and scenarios for the world going forward. But if you're like most of us, your knowledge about the people and day-to-day lives of children growing up in Afghanistan is limited and probably biased by the media. Despite all the misperceptions, what we do know is that while millions more girls are in school today than were in school under Taliban rule, 3.5 million children are still out of school, and 85% of those are girls. And that number is growing, according to Human Rights Watch. And right now, only 37% of adolescent girls are literate. But according to today's guest, there's nothing a terrorist fears more than an educated girl. That's why it seemed like the perfect time to talk to the guys from an incredible company called Combat Flip-Flops. Now, Combat Flip-Flops may sound funny, but the guys behind it are very serious. US Special Forces serious. In fact, 2 of the 3 founders met while serving in Afghanistan and decided they wanted to be the Unarmed Forces. So join us as we travel to Afghanistan with a stop in Colombia and Laos to learn about how 3 guys are creating jobs in places that most people are afraid of, and then turning business proceeds into community good for education in Afghanistan. Welcome, Andy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to have this conversation. I am looking forward to learning about your model and really digging into what you do at Combat Flip-Flops, because it's not every day that there's a business that creates jobs, and it happens in places in the world that most people are afraid of. And then you use the proceeds from that business to invest in communities in other war zones. It's, truly a remarkable model. But before we get there, I want to take a step back and learn about your team, because I happen to know one of your co-founders, and I, for the life of me, cannot figure out how Mr. West Point Army Ranger Griff and you, a self-proclaimed nomadic, hippie bass player, painter, came to form this company. So if you could just sort of explain how this concept even came to be, that'd be great.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong, right? Sure, of course, I'd be happy to. So Combat Flip-Flops started out of an idea from Matt Griffin while he was working in Afghanistan, doing contract work for a medical supply company that was making all sorts of interesting things for just basically any sort of military in the world. He was over there. He had the conceptual idea for this and contacted his buddy from the Rangers, Donald Lee, who they served together in Afghanistan, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. This idea of creating footwear out of combat boot factories in Afghanistan to give them something to do once the buildup of gear for the Afghan National Army and police were complete. that was before I ever met Griff. That was about a year before I ever met Griff. And parallel to that, at the same time, I was courting his sister-in-law. So Griff and I eventually become brothers-in-law. Fast forward to a bachelor party trip, which involved roughly 9 people stuffed in a Suburban road tripping from Washington to Montana. And with enough beer to kind of remove inhibitions, this idea of, hey man, I want to make flip-flops in a combat boot factory in Afghanistan and call it combat flip-flops. To which I said, that sounds like a fantastic idea. I don't really know why, but nobody has ever said they want to make flip-flops in a combat boot factory, let alone in an active war zone. Crazy knows crazy. And that kind of went into the bucket of, and this is a week before my wedding and so forth. So I get married. At the time, I'm in construction. I've been, as you said, I wasn't the hippie anymore and not quite so nomadic, but still running a finishing company, primarily painting and so forth, and really wanted to get out of that. And so the best thing to do when you get married is quit your job 3 months later and start a company, right? So Griff and I talked a little bit, and we just decided to actually kick it off and start going and conceptualize the products and moving forward. And that's how it kind of started. So we had, to nutshell the thing, we decided we wanted to make things to wear while drinking beer in a factory that's designed to make things you wear when you kill people with no money and no experience in a war zone.
Wow. And so you, Griff, and Lee, you're all employees and you're all your own investors as well, right?
Correct. So we're technically managing members of an LLC, but yeah, we all work full time on the project. Griff's the CEO, I'm the president, Lee's the chief marketing officer. We fall into those lanes. We have a couple of employees on the marketing customer service side. Obviously, we contract all of our manufacturing to, either Afghanistan or Colombia or Laos. There's some stuff that we're doing in the States as well. And then we work out of a third-party logistics fulfillment center in Florida, and I'm sure we'll get to the reason why we do that. Now, to get to this point, we've done almost everything ourselves at one point or another, short of, actually cutting and sewing things. But as far as pick, pack, and ship, we actually did make a whole bunch of the flip-flops ourselves at one point because we had to. There's like too many failures to count along the way, but a lot of stubbornness within it. And I think when you marry, what you do and why you do it and intent to a goal, you tend to be able to, at least personally move mountains to try and achieve it. And should this not work, there will definitely be no doubt about leaving it all in the field. It's that kind of mind frame. There's no reason not to do it.
Sure. And I love what you just said about marrying what you do and why you do it.
Sure.
So let's actually talk about what you do and why you do it. But so, we're really here to talk about combat flip-flops. So explain, to the listeners and the viewers, what exactly you do and as you just said, why you do it. But take us to Afghanistan. I mean, as you mentioned, you're sitting here in the United States. So explain to us, why are we going to Afghanistan and what your purpose is?
Sure. So why we're going to Afghanistan primarily is because it was personal to Lee and Griff, right? They fought there. So we wouldn't have even been exposed to the forthcoming why without understanding that, their perspective on this country is tied to military service and, the loss on both sides and everything that's awful about what has been happening over there. Even, regardless of your political view on anything, war sucks. So we've got that. What we believe and what was learned initially is that when you get into these areas, you can have policy, you can have all the things that you want, but at the end of the day, people still want to eat, raise their kids, have a decent life, do all the things that really matter to us that don't have anything to do with how nice your car is or your TV or your cell phone or any of that garbage. At the end of the day, if you're not hungry and your kid is educated and so forth, you probably make better decisions and probably take care of yourself well. And currently in Afghanistan, what's going on is obviously, incredible unemployment and poverty. rights to women are crazy. Access to education for women is ridiculous, and so on. And as we look at like the basic foreign policy and whatnot of, hey, you guys should be doing this, we want to be in there saying, why don't we just give them an opportunity to better themselves and then kind of get out of the way and let them make their own decisions for what they're doing. And the simplest way to do that is just say, hey, business A, B, or C in Afghanistan that makes a product that we know the American market is going to want to buy. We're just going to go through the bullshit of having to try and pull this stuff out of a war zone. And it just really is that. It's difficult. But that also allows them to be in a non-desperate or a better situation to be able to make their own decisions and move forward. So, you know, when there needs to be security for girls to actually go to school safely, you know, and yeah, we could relate that to inner cities in America where there's, you know, metal detectors on high schools. That's all good and fine, but nobody's really attacking the school usually just because of the gender of that kid. That's a different deal. Trying to support those types of initiatives, we'll get more to this too. I'm bouncing around a bit, but just roll with it, of taking the business, creating a profitable business, both, you know, for combat flip-flops as well as our contractors in Afghanistan, Colombia, and Laos, but then taking a portion of our profit and pushing it back to education in Afghanistan to allow the girls, that is specifically women's education, to allow the girls that are coming up now to be more empowered in the future, simply because educated women tend to raise educated kids. Or to be really blunt, like smart mothers don't raise stupid kids, generally. Aside from we're all an idiot when we're young. That's fine. But that's the long play, is these, you know, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old girls right now that we're helping to educate are going to be mothers. They'll be employable. They'll set a different example for their own kids. And that can only help, you know, push their society in a direction that they want it to go.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, back in episode 1, I was talking about some of the work that I do. And essentially, I want to say the numbers were like $1 invested in a girl has an immediate like $16 return on investment. It's the greatest return on any community's in investment and effort. So I think that sounds exactly right to me.
And I wish I could remember the name of the author, so I'm just gonna claim that this is my own quote. But nothing scares a terrorist more than an educated woman.
Sure. Yeah, I completely agree with that.
And that was written by somebody that I really should know their name. So
we'll find it. We'll find it, and I will cite it, and we'll have Will put it in. I will make that happen.
True, right? Yeah.
And so you mentioned a couple of other countries. So while we're here, let's just sort of explain what, you know, we started with Afghanistan, but what is it that you do in these other countries? Is it the same? Is it different? Where all are you working, and what are you doing in those places?
Got it. So, well, we manufacture in 3 primary locations, and that's Afghanistan, Colombia, and Laos. We started trying to do everything in Afghanistan, and if we want to go down that rabbit hole, basically we tried to make flip-flops in Afghanistan. It really didn't work out for a lot of reasons. That led us to having to do a small run on our own, and then led us to Colombia. And Colombia is another example. While it's not present conflict, it's post-narco. And it's a combination of post-conflict combined with good foreign policy, i.e. free trade agreements. So there's an incentive from lack of duties to do business with America, to grow economy. You know, same thing we're trying to do in Afghanistan. Still shocking there's no free trade agreement with the place that we just spent all that money on, but that's a different discussion. But that brings us into Colombia as to like how we found it and why, right? It made sense. So that's our primary, that's where we make the footwear. And then the jewelry comes out of Laos, and we're working with a group called Article 22, who has a full product line, but we've done our own branded stuff with them. And their story, I can't take credit for saying we went and did this, because they had their own vision on what they wanted to do around demining, and they're a partner company of ours, and we're really grateful to have them. They are going around through the Mine Advisory Group, MAG, who is basically blowing up landmines in a safe manner. The locals in Laos are scrapping that metal, smelting it down in the villages into jewelry, selling it through either us or Article 22 or whoever. And for us personally, when you buy a piece of our Peacemaker line, that funds another 3 square meters of demining, as well as the education for Afghanistan. That's just across the board for our products. But that's how the demining process works.
And I'm not wearing it right now, but I actually own some of your jewelry. I have bangles,
Nice.
and they are fantastic. And the reason I'm not wearing them is because I had them on earlier, and I thought, oh, I'll wear them during the interview. And then I proceeded to bang the microphone, the table, and everything else. And so I said, okay, we're going to put this away.
It would have been cool if I'd have said something awesome and you'd just been jingly with all your jewelry.
But I will post pictures along with the episode, because I think I have an Instagram post somewhere where I'm from probably 6 years ago, like whenever the line was first coming out, or shortly after from the first run. I had a couple, which is how I first learned about your organization. Okay, so actually I want to hear a bit more about Colombia. As you were talking, I wrote down a couple notes. And as you explain it, if I understand this correctly, so it's intrinsically linked to Afghanistan because I wrote this down, and so it's like you make products in Colombia to educate girls in Afghanistan because they're products that Americans buy.
Right. Yeah, that's
okay. So I got that right. So tell me a bit more about Colombia, because that's not a circle I would normally think that a business would go, this is a great idea. We'll make Colombian products for Americans to buy to help Afghanistan.
Sure. That happened out of necessity. We didn't plan that. We were going to make products in Afghanistan to employ Afghans and then do all this stuff. And then, we start adding products. So when a product comes here, a product comes from there. But to back it up and say, yeah, the majority of our business, or a huge part of our business, is footwear. So we have, by and large, I can say this because I know my factory workers down there, you've got like Christian and Catholic Colombians selling to America to educate Islamic women. Right? That's awesome. Like, that's so cool to me. When people get upset sometimes when you start putting like the religious tags on it and all that. But the fact that they get upset is why we do it. Because like again, at the end of the day, when I say this to the workers in Colombia, like, do you realize that when you make this pair of flip-flops, that allows a girl to go to school who's the same age as your daughter, who just gets to go to school in Colombia. But for this to happen there, we have to do this. And then the switch goes off, right? So somebody who's sewing product all day, and they're amazing artisans. They're so good at their job. I couldn't be more proud of the work that they do. But plugging that connection into it now, after multiple trips down there, they're asking me how the project in Afghanistan goes and how many girls have we educated and so on. And they understand it and they're proud of it. And sometimes they forget, like they're working in a factory, they're living their life. There's a pandemic, there's all this stuff going on. But when you come and talk to them about the work that they do, why they do it, supporting them, and then letting them know that I'm not at the top of this pyramid, I'm way down here at the bottom, and nothing above me happens without all of them ever, and the customers. It's more of a servant's capacity is how we approach it with them. And they really do kind of understand that. And it tied it together. So I'm not sure if I actually answered your question there, but it's important to us on how all that works. And that's the way that I've found that it's the most impactful to them and to keep things moving in the right direction.
Well, and as you talk about their craftsmanship, their kindness, their culture, as you're describing it, I'm just thinking to myself, like you wearing that American hat. Yeah. That's not necessarily the Colombia that's always painted in movies or the media. And so it's really lovely to hear your, descriptions of what these really awesome people in a beautiful country are like.
I've fallen in love with that country and the people there. And it's unfortunate because, originally, we're seated. I'm a 6'5" gringo. Like, I'm pretty much as white as I get. I'm Austrian, but like, whatever, it's fine. But I am, that's who I am. And I'm going to go to Colombia to do things, and everybody gets scared, and all they think is Escobar and Coke, right? And it's either don't get shot by the cartels or bring me home some blow, man. And it's like, come on. Like, there's so much more going on down here than what you saw on Narcos on Netflix. And I watched it, and it was entertaining, but there's so much more to it. And there's still relics of, remnants of how that all played out in the country. But when you're on the ground, they were unbelievably accepting. There were some cultural things in business that were difficult to get through or understand early on, which is normal. That's just different expectations and so forth. And we had to work through all of that. But what was fun to see very quickly, and you've traveled enough places where you get this probably, when the American shows up, there's the reverse. Like, there's all these expectations, right? We got to take care of you, and we got to do this, and we got to do that. And a lot of it is out of kindness. But for instance, again, my background in construction, I'm used to a working environment. I'm used to things kind of being dirty. I'm used to, you got to make stuff out of stuff, and that's a messy process at times. But I also know that if you keep an organized zone or space, the product is better. We build houses, a clean work site, you had a really on point house. There's stuff to trip over, people got hurt, it wasn't good. So I also know that these guys doing the actual work are incredibly valuable and good at their jobs. So I end up in the factory a lot, just wandering around. And first time I was down there, I just picked up a broom and started sweeping the floor. And they freaked out. Like, people literally stopped working and like, this is the American businessman, right? Like, how could we let him have to sweep and to communicate to them, like, look, anybody can sweep a floor. I can sweep a floor, but I can't do what you do. So don't stop me from sweeping a floor, and like, go be great at what you do. Like, it's okay, right?
I can't do what you do, but anyone can sweep a floor.
I just am not capable of doing that, and you're amazing at it. And like, we're constantly trying to punch past preconceived notions of people, right? So again, a preconceived notion of Afghanistan and what that really looks like, and how could you possibly, make stuff there and export and so forth. Well, really what you have to do is just respect the people that do the work and support them, have a certain amount of grace and understanding with clear boundaries, and move forward. Works in Colombia, works with our employees. Like, that's human relationship. And we're none of this stuff's built by robots. Like, there's very few things that are just built by machines that are unemotional, that don't have somewhere they'd rather be. Right?
And as you said, the word grace, it's something I try to do better. I try to give grace, and particularly in the last year, so much has gone on with the pandemic that grace is a word I try to incorporate. Like, everybody deserves extra grace right now. So I really like that. And clearly, people have given you a lot of grace as well. As you described, you're the American coming in, and clearly at no point did you say, we have all the answers. You had some great ideas, but you said, we failed. We had to shift. This didn't work. We had to move this over here. And so, given that everything didn't work out like you planned, how has the team handled what sound like a lot of major changes and pivots, and yet stayed with your mission? We had such a clear intent of going to these places and providing them opportunity to create a better situation for themselves. And the key point being, what they do with that the definition of that better situation is their decision, not the West's or ours or anybody else's. So
how we've dealt with it is just by remaining focused on that, I guess, and really just being clear about understanding the why. And there's always hard realities, right? If like a business just flat runs out of money, that's a problem. So there's hard decisions that need to be made all along the way, or do you take on investment capital? And there's all these things that happen. That happens whether you're working in war zones or you're working exclusively in the States, or, you know, your local plumber. Like that's business. That stuff's all going to happen. But the hurdles along the way, it's not like, for instance, if we put in a bunch of work to create a new running shoe, and then, you know, that was a highly advanced running or cross-training shoe, there are tons of places to do that work, to do the design work, to run the tooling and so forth, between, you know, all over Asia, Vietnam. Like there's these incredible factories that are making incredible products, and with a certain amount of volume, you can say, here's my stuff, and it's just going to happen. And the shipping lanes are lined out. There's no security issues. It's still difficult because everything's easy until you do it, but don't introduce the cultural and political and danger problems that we've had to deal with. So what would sound like deal breakers were just expected problems or expected roadblocks or expected hurdles. We did run into some issues when we initially wanted to do either certain types of insurance, even investment capital. You know, there's certain things that we just can't insure on paper because of where it is. Like, we can't do it. I can write an insurance policy to insure my product in the factory in Colombia with the right amount of paperwork. That policy does not exist for Afghanistan, right? Like, there's not a number you can pay an insurance company to get that coverage. Like, think about that.
Right. Yeah.
That's an anomaly. Insurance companies will take money to insure anything if you pay enough. They won't touch that place, you know?
As you say that, I'm thinking through, I've not heard you mention this, but if I remember correctly, you guys were on Shark Tank, right?
Yeah. Griffin Lee did the show, but as a company, yeah, we were. Yeah,
Shark Tank. So as you're talking about capital and insurance, and all of a sudden I'm thinking like of the character cast that's on Shark Tank. And I'm like, this is one hell of a difficult thing to try and pitch a group of potential investors. How did that go?
Well, we ended up with a deal with Cuban, and that was back in 2016. It was awesome. Sorry, Mark. It was great. Our favorite part, entertainment-wise, of the show, Lee got to chem like Kevin, and the military guys will know what that means. Kevin dropped out, and Lee handed him a chem light and said, "This is how we mark our dead," to the guy that usually says "you're dead to me" and all that. That was hilarious. That was fun, but it's worked out really well. It's been a good partnership. They've provided some really good insight, you know, when needed. It's not like, you know, their team is sitting right here next to me all day. They've got hundreds of companies on their portfolio. But there's certain things that we come across that it's really nice to be able to send it up the ladder and say, hey, can you help us out with this or help us out with that? Or what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? Mm-hmm. You know, is this a good idea or not? There's a lot of experience there.
And so thinking about that, I guess, explain using that like framework of like, you've got a couple of minutes to like pitch your concept. Can you explain your product process, like from beginning to end, really succinctly? Like, here's where things start, here's where they go, here's how they get produced, and here's how they end up on your arm or around your neck or on your feet.
I'll drop most of I'll talk a little bit about the design because it's actually pretty intense how it works, specifically in Colombia, so footwear. We can go from a line drawing to a wearable finished sample in as little as 3 to 4 hours and as much as 3 to 4 days down there.
Wow.
And it is old school. So with the assumption that we have an outsole, like you have to cut a mold for an outsole and so forth. But if you have some sort of outsole to put it on, all the rest of the materials that go into those things can be hand cut, sewn, laminated, and so on. We're not talking about flip-flops, you know, with layers. We're talking about a shoe, actual shoe. When we decided to do shoes, I went down there, and we've got a guy in that our factory owner knew, who's this Italian trained old school shoe designer. And watching that process, there's no computers. He shows up with what looks like an old pocket cigarette pack with a pencil, a razor blade, an eraser, and a bunch of newsprint paper folded up and stuffed in his pocket, and basically glues paper to a shoe last, which is a big plastic foot. You show him a picture of what you drew or what your idea is. He draws it on the thing. Takes him about a half an hour. He peels it off, cuts it out, creates actual patterns, hands them to the guy over there that cuts it, hands it to the guy that sews it, pulls it on a last, slams everything together, and says, "Here's a shoe in 3 hours." And I was just like, "Holy shit!"
My mind's blown.
Me? I'm trying to get one design done in 2 weeks, and we ran down, I think, 6 different options through 3 iterations and 7 different colorways across 2 weeks. I came home with 60 samples in the end in 2 weeks. And so again, skill, artisanship, a mind frame that doesn't say, I need this to do that. It's just, this is how you do it, combined with all of the materials are within this district of roughly 10 miles of the factory. So there's storefronts for large manufacturers. And yeah, if you need, 400 hides of a certain leather, you have to order that. But you can go buy 5 or 10 of what they carry at any given time, just off the shelf. So it'd be like running around the design district in New York City, right? I want to see fabric. I want to see this. I want to see that. And there's that zone where you can just see it all. Well, when we go down to design, we take an hour or 2 and go rip around, and we buy this, we buy that, we buy that, go back to the factory and do it. So we can move really rapidly in actually developing the product, which is spectacular. Once that's done, we do a lot of work back and forth as far as specifications and details, because the one thing about artisans, and there's a difference between an artisan and a factory worker, factory workers tend to do exactly what's on the specification and don't want to think. They want to just do the thing over and over and over again. Artisans are constantly thinking it'd be a little bit better if, and that causes problems when that happens in production. So specifications are clear. That's our biggest rule. If you do what's on the specification, which I wrote, we agreed on, but I wrote, and it's wrong, it's my fault. If you don't do what's on the specification and it's wrong, it's your fault. So blame me. Just do what's on that piece of paper once we hit production, right? That's how we get consistent products and quality and repeating, economy of scale and all that stuff. That's just how it works. So they are sourcing everything within 10 miles in production. We've got a very rapid turn. Without normal delays, we can usually do a production from order to material sourcing to out the door in fastest 14 days, long side 28. Shipping from Columbia to Florida, where our warehouse is obviously as close as we could get in the States to Florida or to Columbia and have it make sense to ship out on the outbound side. So that's pretty quick, week or 2 at the most. If it's ocean, it's a little bit longer, but if it's air, it's pretty fast. And then we're just normal distribution center in the States, shipping both to America and then globally. And side note, we've actually shipped flip-flops to all 7 continents, including Antarctica.
That's pretty cool. But who in Antarctica is wearing flip-flops?
Some dude who thought it was cool in his heated building. I'm sure, Griff probably has his name, written down somewhere, and that was a long time ago. That was probably 6 or 7 years ago, was some of the original stuff. But we have shipped product to Antarctica.
That's pretty cool. So then, as you describe that, and I think about, you clearly have a very close working relationship with everyone involved, and yet you can't be everywhere all the time. How do you ensure, as you're talking about, all these different players in the process, which the turnaround time is quite staggering, to be honest. But
we're pretty proud of it. Yeah.
You should be very proud of it.
Yeah, we're pretty proud of it.
But, as you talk about those practices, how do you make sure, if you're in Afghanistan and things are happening in Colombia or, wherever, how do you make sure that everyone's best practices are in place and that all the work getting done is above board? And people are not being taken advantage of or exploited when you're not present.
Right. So in Colombia, it's actually very easy because outside of a pandemic year, I travel down there 3 to 4 times a year. On our pricing model with both factories, we have basically kind of an open book policy on these where we're very transparent with what we charge. They got to be very transparent about costs, overhead, everything. So we see all the paperwork from any expense. It's not, I don't say, I want to make this shoe and they say, okay, I'm going to charge you $10 for it. It's like, I want to know what it costs down to the thread. We're going to agree on a profit margin based on overhead, based on labor, based on the power it takes, based on everything, and move forward from there. And the reason for that from a business standpoint is if they say, hey, the cost of leather went through the roof, I just have to go to a spreadsheet and change the price, and there's no negotiation about what I have to pay for it now, because it is what it is. We already went through all this stuff, right? And it works out. Within that, there's government controls and basically taxes and reporting around labor. Huge red flag would be, oh yeah, we don't have to deal with that here. It's like, really, right? But they do, and they deal with it, and we see that information. Combined with regularly with both Afghanistan and Colombia, we're on video chats of just they're in the factory, and it's not like, hey, I'm going to call you tomorrow at 10 and I want to see what's going on. So if there was something weird going on, they could run a bunch of people in there and make it look right. It's just send, show me what's going on with this right now. I have a question. And they're, you just see it, and there's different things culturally that happen in different countries. Like all their rules are different. What's important to me is that they're following their rules, right? That they're following their wage scales, that they're following the stuff that local to where they are is relevant and correct. That's the deal. Are you playing by the rules? Great. We're going to try and empower you a little bit above what's normal here. We're not going to go bonkers and create entitlement, but let's grow. Right. And as long as they agree it's positive for them and it makes sense for us, then everything works out really well.
So it really sounds like both. I can't choose. It sounds like both a free market capitalism approach, but also a very altruistic local community. Sure. Like we have a true heart mission nonprofit model. Like you've somehow done both.
This discussion. So sure. We are a for-profit company. Our manufacturers are for-profit companies. Mm-hmm. We are not a charity. We just aren't. We give to charities. That's awesome. But there's, especially currently in American climate, I see a lot of profit is bad, right? There's nothing wrong with making money. It's all about what you do with it, right? So, you could probably pull up the names of some of the, worst people to exist in the existence of history. They were educated. So is education bad, or what they did with it was bad? So if you make money, fine, you make money, but why? And what are you doing with it? And, how are you helping to achieve whatever that goal is? And nobody can be perfect for all people and never piss somebody off and never agree with somebody's politics or always agree with everyone's politics and so forth. But the human nature component of business is fascinating to me. It's just fascinating to me because once you have a personal attachment to the need to make money because you want to do this thing that you love, which is all conflicting and weird, right? It introduces desperation, fear, impulsiveness, all these things. And it's incredibly difficult at times to just keep your eye on the damn ball, and so that's a really abstract answer to the kind of where you were going with it. But
no, I actually think I get what you're saying. And as someone who has worked in the nonprofit and nonprofit spaces, I have struggled, and I know a lot of people in the nonprofit space have struggled with what I refer to as doing well and doing good.
Sure, we talk about that.
And you know, trying to really piece those together of, you know, well, if I'm doing well, then I should be giving more. Or if I'm doing good, like, not a lot of people who run nonprofits make almost no money, and then they're constantly struggling. And if you don't have funds, it's really difficult to do the work you need to be doing, whether it's, you know, to pay your own bills and keep a roof over your own head and protect your own family, or all the things you need to be doing in the community. You can't do without some, you know, gas in the engine. And so essentially, I think if I'm, you know, hearing you correctly, the products are the gas in your engine, or the oil, or I don't know anything about cars. I have no purpose making this. I have no business talking about engines. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, the cars run on peanut butter. It's great. The fuel for what we do are our customers. At the end of the day, nothing happens without customers. It's this really cool idea, but if people don't want our stuff, it's done. Right? And then the engine is really the manufacturers themselves, right? Because the customers create demand that literally produces products from these manufacturers. And then the byproduct of all that is really what's ultimately in our control, and like, what are we going to do with it? And of course, we have to be profitable. We donate a certain amount. We work with Aid Afghanistan for education. We work with, you know, MAG through the products. We work with the Station Foundation stateside. So they're helping veterans transition back to civilian life in a good way, and really focusing on like family relationship and that sort of thing. It's a fantastic group. They do really, really good work. And I don't claim to really understand it all. One, not being a vet, having to go through that. And two, like, Griff has just worked with them a lot. So, you know, future episode, some other time, he's communicated a bunch about that. But that's really the path. If there's not demand, the mission dies, you know, because the sustainability of the model depends on people that spend money on things they don't need anyway have the opportunity to buy it from a company that's doing it differently. Like, I don't know a lot of people that need flip-flops unless they're required to go and like use public showers that are funky all the time. I would call that a requirement. Like, right on, you got to get something on your feet. I get it. But our nice leather ones with bullet primers that are super cool, look good with jeans, and like, you know, you wear with it, whatever. Like, you don't need that. I like them. People like them. There's nothing wrong with that either. So why not buy from a company that may have a different purpose or a different intent or a different reason? And that's just a choice.
Right.
You know, the customers have the same choice that the factory workers and the factory owners do of like, we're going to give you this opportunity. What are you going to do with it? Well, we're paying them to make stuff. What they do with their profit is up to them. We're giving a customer an opportunity to buy a product. Should they choose to, great. Should they not, that's not bad. That's just a challenge.
Right.
That's all.
I think it's great to hear what purchasing a product from Combat Flip-Flops does. Not just here, right? But really it's about what it does everywhere else. So I'm curious, what are your most popular products?
By volume, it's the flip-flops. Flip-flops and chamois by far. And we've continually shrunk our product line. We've just thrown darts and tried, like, you know, direct printed iPhone cases and all this crap. Like, whatever, let's just make stuff. And what it really came down to is, you know, the AK-47, the leather flip-flop, the floperators, those are like by far the highest volume selling thing. Makes sense. Our name says flip-flops, right? Right behind that categorically would be the chamois, and then behind that would be the shoes. And then we found it's most effective for us to make the jewelry available in specific holiday times like Christmas, Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, and so forth. It just allows us to kind of aggregate our production and move it in a different way. And from a business standpoint, just made the most sense. But by far, it's the flip-flops for sure. And we've had to go through our learnings. Like, I've always loved our products, but where the evolution of it all, you know, we definitely, looking back, could have done a lot better at the beginning, design wise and visually and all that kind of stuff. It's just like getting everything nailed down is really intense. And it's fun even when I'm in Colombia, our factory owner and I'll sit down and he's got samples from, the whole run, and I have them here as well. And he's just like, holding, he's like, wow. Like, it started with this, and now we're here. And then there's always the discussion of like, wow, our problems now, like the stuff we talk about now is, you had that one bad run of leather, not these astronomically huge things of like delaminations or, bad glue or all this just stuff that needed to get nailed down. And there's infinite details. There's just always something that can be better.
Of course, as with any business. As someone who doesn't wear a lot of flip-flops, I don't own any of your cotton products, but I really want them because I've heard they're absolutely incredible. And your cotton comes straight from Kabul, right?
Yeah. So that's all loomed there, right? We're not just buying blanks and dyeing it or whatever. These guys are looming the chamois in Kabul. They're mechanical looms. They're not hand looms, but they're pretty straightforward. We're looking at doing some upgrades with them right now for different types of looms and so forth, and it'll allow us to do some different designs and so on. But it's funny. They're like, we want the simple ones. There's some really advanced stuff out there that's really incredible. And he's like, there's nobody in Afghanistan that can fix them. Coolest thing for me to hear. Just the coolest thing for me to hear. Not like, don't give me a Rolls because I got a Chevy mechanic, right? Like, that's real. That's somebody whose head is in the damn game, and not thinking it's all going to be good. But when it goes wrong, how do we produce? Like, the level of practicality in especially in Afghanistan is staggering. It's just staggering. When Griff and I were rolling around out there, the one time that I've got to go, which was 6 or 7 years ago now, 8 years ago now, just seeing the use of raw material, the ability to work with metal, the people they just make shit to do stuff. You don't go buy things. You find stuff and then you make something out of it and you do something with it. It's so incredibly practical until you can, afford the nice thing. But I think about, actually reminds me a little bit of my upbringing in Montana and my stepfather, who was this rancher, 20-year Navy EOD guy, but just would make stuff out of things constantly, and like wouldn't buy stuff. He'd go and weld something or be bending, just making things work. And the way they do it is just on this entirely different level. And then when it comes down to, a 5-figure, 6-figure investment in equipment, and that same mind frame's attached to it because they know that it's sustainable and they know that's how they can get their job done, and have a healthy business is so respectable to me. That's just it. It just makes me respect them that much more.
Certainly.
No entitlement. There's no frivolousness. It's incredible. The stuff that they don't throw away.
That's great.
It's pretty wild.
And so for people who want to see all these beautiful things that they've crafted, they want to purchase, where can people contact you and find all of your items? And then I also, with that, would like you to speak a little bit about, with the purchases, where do those funds go? What are the organizations that you support?
Sure.
And so, sure. When people spend money on these items, what exactly is happening with that money?
Got it. So it's combatflipflops.com, just our name, plural, combatflipflops with an S.com. Everything's available there. We don't have any brick and mortar and so forth. Everything's sold through the website. So that's where you can find this stuff. When a purchase is made, every item purchased in the footwear and chamois category funds a day, and the jewelry funds a day of schooling for an Afghan girl. And we donate that through Aid Afghanistan for education. And you can find them if you go to globalgiving.com and search Aid Afghanistan for Education. You can find that program there. You want to donate directly to it, do it. We encourage it all the time.
I'll also link in the show notes, and then also on the website where I have your episode, I'll link all of your partners that you mentioned. Yeah, happily.
The Station Foundation is donated to on an annual basis as well. And then Mine Advisory Group is tied through the purchase of the jewelry. So jewelry is like the double dip, right? It on its own is handling demining, but then is also a day of education as well. So that's where it goes. And as I said, we're a for-profit business. We're not giving away every dime we make. If we did that and anything went wrong, we'd be out of business really quick, just like anybody else. On the other side of it, it's fun to hear from me or it's fun to hear from Griff. But honestly, if you buy something and you communicate with us, you're going to be talking to the best customer service team on the planet. And I'm completely confident to say that. Go hit our websites, read our reviews. You're going to see this name Jill pop up. They don't talk about us. It's just Jill's awesome, Jill's awesome, Jill's awesome, Jill's awesome, Jill's awesome. Like we try and keep it as just raw and real as we can with everybody and take care of you.
Yeah. Well, you guys are awesome too. And so I'm really thankful for your time. And as I said, all the organizations that you're linked with will certainly add so people can find those. They can learn more. They can donate. And I will certainly also point them to your YouTube where there's some very good videos. There's also a lot of foolishness. And I think your personalities
threaten us with a good time.
Really come through.
We wanted to make flip-flops in a war zone.
And I love what you said earlier, and I want to end with this quote you said, everything's easy until you do it. And I think that's awesome. When you said that, I wrote it down. So, I know it's not easy, and the work you've done has not been easy, but thank you guys for doing it. And I know all the other people in the process of Combat Flip-Flops is thankful for the work you do.
Oh, right on. It's super kind. Thank you. This has been fun.
It's been great. All right. Have a great day.
Yeah, you do as well.
Thank you.
Bye.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review or comment wherever you're listening. Also, go follow us on social media and get resources for everything we talked about today at theglobalgoodpodcast.com. Last thing, send us a story at stories@theglobalgoodpodcast.com. This week's episode was researched and written by me, Nicole Roberts, with audio and production by WillPower Productions. Images and video were provided by Combat Flip-Flops, Anthony Bolante of the Puget Sound Business Journal, AFN Afghanistan, USAID Afghanistan, the U.S. Marines, and the U.S. Navy.